Hello, my name is Carla and I'm going to show how I'm going to upcycle this panel from a toy tent into a play mat. And actually this tent fell apart. It was my son's when he was very young. It had 3 panels. It had 2 that looked exactly like this on the sides. And then the end of the tent looked like this. So I think I could make 3 play mats out of it. So I'm going to give that a try, and I'm going to use for batting, someone gave me a sleeping bag that had a broken zipper. So I took apart all the panels and I got some kind of thin, soft batting. So I'm going to give that a try for upcycling. This type of fabric is a little bit tricky to use because it's kind of like a synthetic, very thin, kind of crinkly. You know, you can't hold an iron to it very long or it melts. So this is a bit of an experiment. We'll see how it goes. So there was a plain green panel on the tent that was the same size as the end of the tent. So I'm going to repurpose that to be the back of this playmat. And then I've trimmed some of that sleeping bag batting to the size of this panel. And now I'm just whip stitching the 2, because I didn't have one the exact same size. I'm piecing together these 2 pieces of batting, sometimes it's called Franken batting, in order to make a nice square piece of batting. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. After I put the batting in between, I put the panel back on top. I then pinned it every so often, but I feel like this fabric is so slippery, and I'm concerned that when I go to machine quilt it, it's gonna slide all over the place. So I actually, in this case, you can see on this one, I basted it. So I've gone ahead and basted it with some big stitches, and then when I run it through the machine, I'm hoping everything will stay nice and flat. So I'm gonna go ahead and baste this panel and the other one as well. So I finished quilting this panel, and I used my walking foot to hopefully pass both the bottom and the top panels through at the same speed, and it seems to have worked even though it was kind of slippery. I am really glad that I did the basting. So the next step, I'm going to trim up the edges and make sure they're pretty even. They're very close, but just to make sure it's completely even. And then I'm going to reuse, this is some trim that I found salvaged when I took apart the broken tent. So I'm going to use that and put that as a binding around the edge. At the beginning of this video, I talked about how I was upcycling this tent. It had 3 panels, and I had a couple of plain green panels as well from that tent, and that's what I used for the backing on two of the panels, but there was only enough of this green stuff to do two of the panels. So I'm now working on the third panel, and you can see I went into my stash and I found some of this nice green check basic cotton, quilting cotton, and I like it because it's a similar green and it's kind of fun, but it was more difficult to deal with because when I was quilting these two together and they were the same type of fabric, then it quilted together really easily. But then when I quilted together this panel that has this stiffer fabric on the front and this more less stiff fabric on the back, the walking foot and my sewing machine, it just couldn't, it was struggling to keep them together. So even though I had basted them together, I ended up getting some wrinkles on this back panel. So I ended up, redoing sections of it. Now it's lying nice and flat. But that is a consideration when you're dealing. I had never done that before, where I had one kind of fabric on the front and another on the back. And I think the main thing I would say is that what I learned is not to baste it, just baste it in the direction that you're going to do the quilting. Don't baste it opposite to that because it would cause it to bunch up. So that would be the fix for that. So now I'm just going ahead and hand sewing on the binding. Okay, so I finished these beautiful, fun truck panels, and I wanted to show you the final result. So here's the first panel, and you can see I just did a horizontal quilting lines, and the way I did the lines was I did like mostly brown thread where it's brown, mostly light blue thread where it's light blue, and that's, I changed the color of quilting thread to match the background. And the background of this one was another part of the quilt, another part of the tent that I upcycled. You can see it's sort of this green type of fabric. And I made a sleeve across the top so that you could hang it up on the wall. And that was, again, upcycling a piece of the tent that had the branding on it. So there's panel number 1. And then panel number 2, it looks exactly the same on the front because it was the other side of the tent, and it's very cute. And again, I quilted it using the matching threads that go with the background. Now in this case, I didn't have enough fabric from the tent to do the backing, so I used some quilting cotton that has this checkerboard, green and yellow checkerboard, and I used the very last tiny pieces of green that I had left from the tent to make this quilting sleeve where you could hang that up on the wall or lay it on the ground as a play mat, either way. And in both cases, you can see I made the binding from that same fabric. This was the actual binding of the tent as well. It was already cut in that skinny binding width. And here was what was the back of the tent, and it's now a smaller panel. And this one, I just quilted it along kind of where the streets are with gray to match the street. And again, on the back one of this one, I had enough of the green left over from the tent to make the backing, and enough of this to make the sleeve so that you could hang it up on the wall, or it could lay flat as a play mat, whatever you would prefer. So that is the end of this upcycling project that I did with my son's old play tent. The batting that I upcycled from the sleeping bag worked fabulously. It was great. This is a fantastic source of free batting. If you're looking for, it's relatively thin batting, but for a wall hanging, it's perfect. And in this case, this tent had barely been used. I mean, the sleeping bag that I upcycled had barely been used. So the batting had some nice loft and was very clean and seemed great. So what a great way to upcycle a sleeping bag rather than tossing it in the landfill. So I hope this inspires you to upcycle any tent that or similar play toy that maybe your child has outgrown. My son certainly has. He's almost 18 years old now, but I finally upcycled his tent, and I was able to upcycle a sleeping bag too. I hope you found this project inspiring, and hit like and subscribe on this video.